Hello students, today we will deal with the topic budgeting from the unit project planning. A budget is a key element of most grant proposals and serves as a blueprint for spending the project's funds. An effective proposal budget outlines the proposed project in fiscal terms and helps reviewers to determine how the project will be conducted. Budget information about activities planned and personnel who will serve on the project provides reviewers with an in-depth picture of how the project will be structured and managed. Budget details usually reveal whether a proposed project has been carefully planned and may ultimately be feasible. The proposed budget must give an accurate assessment of all cost items and cost amounts that are deemed necessary and reasonable. It should be complete, that is, it should include all the costs of any personnel, supplies and activities required by the project. The project needs to be feasible within the budget presented. If major cost areas are omitted or underestimated, the project as proposed will not be considered feasible. Over the course of the project, many different stakeholders are going to review the budget and refer back to it. The decisions made now at the proposal stage will continue through the life of the grant, and others will make decisions based on it at future stages. Therefore, it is time well spent to prepare a reasonable budget. A reasonable budget is one that is based upon actual costs when possible. The budget will become an integral part of the obligation to the sponsor, particularly regarding time or effort commitments. It will evolve into a useful management tool during negotiations, and if the project is funded, the budget will become the financial plan used by the funding agency to provide support. When variances between the budget and actual expenses are indicative of a change in scope, this may require sponsor approval. Often required with the budget is a narrative justifying budgeted items. This budget justification will vary depending on the sponsor's budget format. Developing and managing budgets can be a challenging task whenever they need to plan a project, write a proposal and implement an activity. Efficient financial management is essential for the growth of any organization. Besides, if well-managed and transparent financial system is present in an institution, it enables donor agencies to gain confidence and offer support to it. However, setting up an efficient financial management system requires a sound understanding of financial practices and principles. A budget is a statement of anticipated results during a designated time period expressed in financial and non-financial terms. Budget cover a designated time period, usually a year. At stated intervals during that period, actual performance is compared directly with the budget. Targets and deviations are quickly detected and acted upon. Many tend to plan out a budget only when they need to develop a project proposal for a donor agency. Besides, they only think of the short-term project needs, not about the long-term sustainability of the organization. Budget, in simple terms, means a document where you specify how much money you are going to spend. In other words, expenditure, especially if your organization is going to receive grants. In some cases, as in businesses, budgets can also include the money that the organization is going to generate or income. The latter is important because managing any organization does not mean just spending. It also needs to look at how costs can be covered and money can be saved for other activities. In another sense, budget is all about planning expenses and saving costs. Developing a budget is always a complicated task, especially when we need to develop a proposal and satisfy the donor agency in the budget format. Otherwise, it is easier to write a proposal without budget than developing a budget requesting funds. However, if financial system is clear, the task of developing budget is also simple. Budgets have become complicated because of the increased need of transparency and accountability. One should not forget that donor agencies are also required to submit their expenditure for proper audits, and they have to maintain proper account books. Another important factor to be observed here is that as budget formats become more and more difficult, the expenditure on administration has also been tightened. Donor agencies are less interested in supporting overhead costs of an organization. Besides, the less the institution proposes for office infrastructural needs, the chances are better for getting the requested grants from the donor agency. Usually, the senior and the experienced staff of the organization are involved in developing the budget. They should be in a position to take responsibility for financial aspects of the project. It is also better if they have experience in managing project finances in a cost-effective manner. The staff members who can be involved in developing the budget: organization or institution head, finance officer, project officer. It is important for all these staff members to be aware of the vision and objectives of the organization, the needs and integrities of the project implemented, the administration and financial policies of the organization, and the approaches of the donor agency. A finance committee can be constituted to oversee the income and expenses. It would be a good idea to involve one of the members of this committee or take his or her opinion in developing a budget. The project officer should be primarily responsible for developing the draft budget, since this person will have a better idea of the field realities and requirements. He or she can then submit the draft to the finance officer for any inputs. The director can then convene a meeting of key persons for final review and approval. In this way, the process of budget formulation will remain complete and all aspects of the organization and the project will be included. When developing a budget for a project or an organization, the exercise involves going back and forth from activities to budget and from budget to activities. This process will continue till the project officer refines it and gains confidence in the entire proposal. When conceiving a project, the activities which will be carried out for the coming year have to be listed out. An intensive discussion with team members about the costs involved in implementing various project activities has to be done. For each project activity, the team should discuss about the inputs required, estimate the realistic cost for those inputs. Whether it is to cover expenses of the staff persons involved in the project activity or buying some material or paying for travel, all these can be written down on for each activity in an Excel sheet. Then start mentioning these activities and the proposed costs and calculate the total expenses. The finance officer can advise on the inflation costs, current prices, and any other overheads missing. The organizational head may include other administrative expenses if required, salaries, and any new purchases. Most budgets are mainly composed of two kinds of costs: direct costs and indirect costs. Direct costs are costs that can be identified specifically with a particular sponsored project, an instructional or institutional activity, or one that can be directly assigned to such activities relatively easily with a high degree of accuracy. These costs include expenditures for project personnel, salaries and employee benefits, supplies, travel, equipment, telephones, and postage. All direct cost items must be included in the budget. Indirect costs are incurred by a donor, cannot be identified specifically with a particular project or program. They include the costs of many services the college or institution provides, that is, procurement, administrative, library, technology transfer, custodial, accounting of finance, and security, as well as building maintenance and depreciation and utilities. These costs are often referred to as the cost of doing business, business overhead, or facilities and administrative costs. There are different types of costs that have to be mentioned in the budget. Most donor agencies prefer to have the cost spread over under different heads so as to get an overview of how the resources have been divided between different types. Basically, we can divide the overall cost as operational costs. Operational costs include those expenses that have to be met for implementing activities for a project or an organization. These are directly billed to the donor agency because they have a direct impact on the beneficiary community. Activities such as organizing a village meeting, conducting a training workshop, running an awareness program involve certain expenses. These expenses are listed under the operational costs in a budget. Staff costs. Staff costs refers to the expenses towards paying salaries and consultancy fee to the staff of the organization. Staff costs include expenses right from the recruitment of the staff, that is interview, orientation, etc., to their salaries. Professionally speaking, it is important to mention how much time a particular staff will provide for the project, and his or her salary has to be calculated accordingly. For example, the head of the organization may be able to give only 25% of the time to a particular project for which funds are being requested and budgeted. So, the salary will also be fixed based on this time only. Core costs. Core costs are also costs incurred towards the operational expenses but of the organization. Most donor agencies would like to know how much money the organization will spend on administration. Costs here can include staff meetings, stationery, and other office maintenance expenses. In some cases, the expenses towards hiring a receptionist or caretaker who is not directly contributing to the project can be listed here. Capital costs. Although donor agencies are advising to massively cut down on capital costs, yet these costs continue to remain essential. These include expenses for buying computers, office furniture, vehicle, office building, etc. Some donors have even stopped funding capital costs completely. If proposing these costs in a budget, ensure that they cover less than 10% of the total budget. Donor agencies put a condition that they would be able to fund only 70 to 80% of the total budget submitted to them for funding. The rest of the 20% should be sourced from elsewhere. Sourcing funding from elsewhere means matching the contribution made by the donor agency from other places or from organization or institution. Donor agencies stress upon this because it only ensures the donor that the organization takes responsibility and ownership to the project. The donor agency expects the contribution to come either from the organization itself or from the community. It could also be possible that another donor agencies can support the 20% costs. In some cases, if the government agency is a partner in the project, it can provide this fund as well. In mobilizing the matching contribution, it may not be easy for the local government to give out direct money for the project as matching contribution, but can support in terms of using their infrastructure and other resources. The organization can request the government for using their building premises to organize workshops and meetings on free of cost. One of the government officials can participate in a project activity as a resource person free of cost. These contributions can then be calculated in terms of costs and put in the budget as a contribution. Similarly, if there is a community contribution in kind, like community members providing labor service for a project activity, can also be considered as a cost contributed by them to the project. This can be put up in the budget. Another important source can be the organization itself. If the organization is well established and have own office, computers, vehicles and other infrastructure that can support the project, its cost can be estimated and put it in the budget as matching contribution. Contingency amount refers to the money set aside to cover any unforeseen expenses of the organization or the project. Contingency expenses are required because any organization or a project can face an uncertainty because of which certain costs are incurred. As a standard practice, the contingency amount is usually 10% of the total budget. Monitoring and evaluation costs. Some budget formats seek specific information about costs proposed for monitoring and evaluation of the project. Overhead costs. Overhead costs are expenses that are required for running the organization. These expenses may not be directly contributing towards implementing a project, but they are still essential to maintain the office and manage the day-to-day affairs of the organization. Usually, these costs should not exceed more than 10% of the total budget in any good proposal. R&D expenses. R&D or research and development expenses refer to those expenses required by the organization or a project to undertake research, assessment and consultation for the intervention. In some projects, it could be just the part of the initial work, or in some others, it could remain a continuous activity. Startup costs. Startup costs relate to the expenses incurred by the organization initially for launching a project or developing the organization. For new projects or organizations, activities such as office setup, staff recruitment, orientation, pre-feasibility studies, etc. all fall under the startup costs. Unit costs. Unit cost is the cost of a single item or a unit. It could be a per day cost of a staff member or a consultant or a single cost of a computer machine. Cost-benefit analysis or CBA and cost-effectiveness analysis or CEA. Both cost-benefit analysis and cost-effective analysis are useful tools for program evaluation. Cost-benefit analysis is an economic decision-making approach used particularly in government and business. CBA is used in the assessment of whether a proposed project, program or policy is worth doing or to choose between several alternative ones. It involves comparing the total expected cost of each option against the total expected benefits to see whether the benefits outweigh the costs and by how much. In CBA, benefits and costs are expressed in money terms and are adjusted for the time and value of money, so that all flows of benefits and flows of project costs over time are expressed on a common basis in terms of their present value. Cost effectiveness analysis is a technique that relates the cost of a program to its key outcomes or benefits. Cost benefit analysis takes that process one step further, attempting to compare cost with the dollar value of all of a program's many benefits. These seemingly straightforward analysis can be applied anytime before, after or during a program implementation, and they can greatly assist decision makers in assessing a program's efficiency. Cost effectiveness analysis seeks to identify and place dollars on the cost of a program. It then relates these costs to specific measures of program effectiveness. Analysts can obtain a program's cost effectiveness ratio by dividing costs of what we term units of effectiveness. Units of effectiveness are simply a measure of any quantifiable outcome central to the program's objectives. For example, a dropout prevention program in a high school would likely consider the number of dropouts prevented to be the most important outcome. Like cost effectiveness analysis, cost benefit analysis also identifies and places dollar values on the cost of programs, but it goes further, weighing those costs against the dollar value of program benefits. Typically, analysts subtract costs from benefits to obtain the net benefits of the policy. If the net benefits are negative, they are referred to as net costs. Net benefits is equal to total benefits minus total costs. Those faced with deciding between the two types of analysis may find it helpful to keep three basic questions in mind. First, How the results are useful. Benefit cost analysis enables you to compare strategies that do not have the same outcomes, or to compare strategies across different areas of public expenditure, example health, welfare, justice. Cost effectiveness analysis is useful for comparing strategies that are trying to achieve the same objective, example increased graduation rates. Secondly, resources. Benefit cost analysis typically require more resources because they take more time for analysis and involve significant methodological expertise, often in economics, such as the capacity for determining the discounted value of a stream of benefits and costs. Third, how difficult are costs and benefits to value. While you may want to have as much information as possible on both benefits and costs, you must weigh the value of the increased accuracy gained from the accumulation of new data against the cost associated with the data collection. Thus, any analysis should begin by assimilating existing data to determine whether it is sufficient. The more intangible the benefit, the more likely it is that a cost effectiveness analysis will be of greater use to decision makers. This type of analysis can help them assess whether a cost is justifiable when compared with other uses of the same funds. It is important to note that benefit cost analysis and cost effectiveness analysis could lead to different conclusions about the same program, depending upon how benefits are valued in dollar terms. However, if the evaluation is concerned with a program with a single objective or closely related objectives, programs or alternatives achieving the highest cost effectiveness should also achieve the highest benefit cost ratio. Both require judgments on measurement issues that should be brought to the attention of the decision maker. However, both techniques are useful to provide a format for analysis that can lead to better decisions. This brings us to the end of the unit budgeting. Hope you have all understood. Any questions?
Hi ma'am, I am Pujita. I have a question. What is participatory budgeting?
Okay, participatory budgeting or PB is a different way to manage public money or to engage people in government. It is a democratic process in which community members directly decide how to spend part of a public budget. It enables taxpayers to work with government to make the budget decisions that affect their lives. The process was first developed in Brazil in 1989, and there are now over 1,500 participatory budgets around the world. Most of these are at the city level for the municipal budget. PB has also been used, however, for countries, states, housing authorities, schools and school systems, universities, coalitions and other public agencies. Though each experience is different, most follow a similar basic process. Residents brainstorm, spending ideas, volunteer budget, delegates develop proposals based on these ideas. Residents vote on proposals and the government implements the top projects. For example, if community members identify recreation spaces as a priority, their delegates might develop a project for basketball court renovations. The residents would then vote on this and other proposals, and if they approve the basketball court, the city pays to renovate it. Hope this answers your question. Any further questions? This brings us to the end of this unit, budgeting. Thank you for your listening. Hope you have all understood.